Before you watch this video, make sure you've watched parts 1 and 2 of every cancelled N64 game. With games like The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, the vaguely titled adventure game genre was another defining part of the N64's library. Shadowgate Rising was a joint project between Infinite Ventures and Image Space. The title was a sequel to Shadowgate 64: Trials of the Four Towers, slated for a late '99 release on N64 and PC. It starred a woman named Raven, and in March of '99, a comic book series centering on her was posted on the Shadowgate website, though the story was never finished. At some point during development, the N64 version was shelved, and the team set their sights on the PC, though in the end, nothing materialized. Dead Ahead was another title from Software Creations, being made in conjunction with Optical Entertainment. Originally slated for a holiday '97 release, a preview in EGM described it as an adventure game with fighter elements similar to Tekken and RPG elements from Final Fantasy and Zelda. EGM even went on to say it could be the most genre-defining fighter since Street Fighter II. One notable team member was the game's composer, David Newman, who worked on films such as Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and The Flintstones. Despite having a talented lineup of developers, things weren't so great behind the scenes. The team's manager, Hayden Dalton, said that before production had even started, nobody wanted anything to do with the project. Another developer recalled the game on Reddit, saying their publisher Tommy wasn't a big name in the West when it came to video games, which was a problem. The team tried pitching the game to Acclaim amongst a few other studios, but to no avail. A lack of interest led to the ambitious title being scrapped. One title in development at UK-based International Computer Entertainment, or ICE, was Spooky. The title was first shown off in late '97, depicting the player's task of saving an alien world from a race called the Archmorph. The player would do this by seeking out 30 pieces of a mirror, with some only being accessible after defeating certain enemies. The protagonist would have been able to mutate into 3 different forms, each with different fighting techniques and moves to solve puzzles, something akin to Majora's Mask. ICE also said the game featured real-time cutscenes with a comic book aesthetic. N64 Magazine's December '97 issue had the game slated for a vague '98 release, but alas, it never released. Another cancelled 64 DD game comes from HAL Laboratory, titled Metal Slader Glory 2. This was a follow-up to the original 1991 title on Famicom, and would have utilized the add-on's unique features such as the internal clock and rewritable discs. For one reason or another, the game never came to be. But not all was lost for the series. Series creator Yoshimiru Hoshi and his team would go on to release a director's cut of the first game for the Super Famicom in 2000, which ended up being the last officially released title for the console. Mario Kart 64 cemented the racing genre as a staple on the N64. This led to many more racers being made for the system, but not all of them crossed the finish line. Kyle Petty's No Fear Racing 64 was a tech demo of sorts that shared its name with a previous title on the Super Nintendo. The title was unveiled during the initial reveal of the Ultra 64 in 1995. Only a handful of screenshots were shown, featured in issue number 4 of French gaming magazine's CD Consoles. The game was being developed by Leland Interactive and was being published by Williams Entertainment, with no reason given for its cancellation. The scrapped Wildwaters by Looking Glass was announced at E3 '99 and would have had several game modes that boasted impressive water physics for the time. However, the studio was facing serious financial issues. Looking Glass ended up closing down in May 2000, with Wildwater going under with them. A dump of the game was found by the ROM group Team Carrot and uploaded online in April 2012. This build only features the first level, which, when completed, the player's kayak falls out of bounds. Looking Glass worked on another N64 racer called Mini Racers, also revealed during E3 '99. Mini Racers had both single and multiplayer modes, with multiplayer working in either split-screen or top-down mode, akin to Rare's RC Pro Am games. The game even had a track editor that allowed players to make their own courses. Mini Racers was playable at several trade shows that year, but failed to materialize after Looking Glass closed its doors. Even so, in May 2000, IGN said a source affiliated with the studio claimed Mini Racers was in the hands of Nintendo, having been completed and approved. Nothing came from this, though in April 2012, Team Carrot released a ROM of Mini Racers, though as expected, the build is far from complete. Tamiya Racing was a title developed by Intermetrics, yet again in association with Looking Glass. In 2012, an early prototype surfaced on eBay from a seller who also had possession of the Wildwaters prototype. The cart sold for $1,358 and 33 cents, and by April 5th, the ROM was dumped online, once again thanks to the efforts of Team Carrot. Angel Studios' Buggy Boogie went through several changes before being shelved. It was announced for the Ultra 64 in 1995, originally being a much darker game that centered around arena mech battles, with cars being able to eat the competition and take on different forms. While under the Dream Team umbrella, Angel Studios worked closely with Nintendo on the project, even under the watchful eye of Miyamoto, who felt the game wasn't hitting its stride. He told the team to try and find the fun in their game and checked in on them every 3 months. Over time, the game took on a more lighthearted tone similar to Mario Kart, and a 97 preview from N64.com said it was over half complete, believing it'd be released later that year. However, after 9 months of progress, Miyamoto wasn't seeing any finished game coming out of it. He assigned the studio onto a fantasy golfing game, which also never saw release. Not all was lost for Buggy Boogie, however, as some of its assets were repurposed for the 64 DD title Mario Artist Polygon, specifically the game's Jiken World segment. Developed by Seta, Rev Limit made its debut at Space World 96. The game had a mixed reception from journalists who praised its visuals, but not its gameplay, citing it as somewhat slow. The game was slated for release in the first quarter of 97, though it was later pushed back to 98. Rev Limit was a no-show at that year's E3, and when IGN reached out to Seta, they said it was going through some retooling. In 99, Rev Limit made the jump to the disk drive and would make use of the system's online capabilities. Unfortunately, Seta ran into financial troubles around this time, and the game was soon cancelled. Come 2016, a pre-production cart of the game cropped up at a Yahoo auctions lot in Japan, with the build being from 99. The cartridge was discovered and purchased by the Japanese user Retro Game TV, who later uploaded footage of it to their YouTube channel. With the release of the original Hydro Thunder on N64, Midway had plans for a Hydro Thunder 2. Although it was scrapped, the game received a spiritual successor in 2009. This was H2 Overdrive, developed by Raw Thrills, a team featuring devs from the original Hydro Thunder. In 2010, a proper sequel was released on Xbox Live Arcade titled Hydro Thunder Hurricane. Another racing title on N64 was Beetle Adventure Racing. The game received near-universal acclaim from fans and reviewers alike, so it seemed likely there'd be a sequel. Developers at Paradigm never released another installment, and it wasn't until 2013 where it was discovered a sequel was in the works at some point. The name of the game showed up on a developer's resume, citing the game as an N64 title slated for release in 2000. F1 World Grand Prix 3 appeared on the same resume. Given the info on the resume, it seems the game would have been a spruced-up iteration of F1 World Grand Prix 2, but it never came to be. A racing game called VRS was in the works under developer Marigal and would have taken advantage of the N64 microphone, used with games such as Hey You Pikachu. Players would give out voice commands to control their driving, though nothing else was shared about the title. Studio Japan System Supply had a racer in the works called Cavalry Battle 3000. The title would have been somewhat similar to Road Rash, but all there is to go on is a single screenshot and a brief description of the game. While there were plenty of racing titles on N64, one genre that seemed underutilized was the sports genre. Acclaimed Sports Soccer, also titled Ultra Soccer, was in the works at Probe Entertainment. The game was conceived in 1996 with a 98 release as the target, but the game was pushed back to 99. Strong competition from EA and Konami's own soccer games had the team worried, so they decided to redo their game from the ground up. Given this was their second time delaying the game, things looked grim. An acclaimed press release from April 99 said the game would be playable at E3 with a full release later that August, but these plans fell through and it was ultimately shelved. The unreleased title Hockeydrome was announced in a European magazine in March of 95 and was set to be published by Activision. The game was allegedly shown at CES 95 and was also planned for a release on PS1 and the Sega 32X. Given the title, we can only assume it would have been a hockey game. Surf Assault is a scrapped arcade surfing game from Looking Glass that used the water physics engine seen in Wildwaters. The game's cast was made up of anthropomorphic characters to separate it from the other surfing games of the era, and was said to be similar in tone to Mario Kart. The story centered on a surfing contest taking place in outer space. Jetball was made by British studio Codemasters and was said to be similar to Pong with a futuristic flair. The game emerged from a batch of concepts made by a six-man team that had worked on Micro Machine 64. Another concept from this batch was a mini-golf game called Birdie. Both titles were made for the N64, but never made it out of the conception stage. UEFA Euro 98 was being developed by Power and Magic, but it didn't get far in development. The game is a bit of an outlier, as from 1996 to 2016, a UEFA soccer title was released every 2 years, with the 98 game being the only omission. Development development was apparently taking too long to meet the deadline, and the game was scrapped. Acclaim's Austin-based studio, then known as Iguana Entertainment, had a sports game in the works called Sports Immortal. It's not known when it was set for release, believed to have been sometime between 97 to 99. The game's designer shared a design doc giving an overview of the game. It was described as a futuristic sports title, a concept that came from another cancelled game from the studio called Immortal Hockey. The goal was to score as many points as possible, being done humanely or otherwise. Goals had a power zone where if the player pulled off a power shot, it had a payoff reminiscent of the NBA Jam games. The game never got the green light, and the team went on to make other titles like Turok 64 and Iggy's Wreckin' Balls. Deer Hunter 64 was an entry in the Deer Hunter series. Basically, no information about the game exists aside from the name and the publisher, being Microware Systems Corporation. Taking another peek at developer Looking Glass, the company were also working on a sports title called Warball. It was a dodgeball title where different dodgeballs had different attributes. One of the developers, Dan Matansky, had done some initial concept work and recalls how the game kept getting pushed back to the point where the team just lost interest and shelved it for good. Another genre that went somewhat underutilized on the N64 was the fighting genre, with several cancelled titles under its belt. Developer Ocean Software had made several attempts at making a game based off the DC Comics character Lobo. A fighting game was planned as far back as '92 for the Commodore A1200, and later for consoles such as the SNES, Genesis, and the Atari Jaguar. However, nothing ever released, with game previews citing it as a buggy mess. In issue 33 of French magazine Superpower, Ocean mentioned plans of creating a Lobo game for the Ultra 64. Because of their history of trying to make a Lobo fighting game, it's assumed this N64 game was also planned to be some sort of fighter. This game never materialized in any form. In development at Bottom Up, Toon Panic was a fighting game with a similar setup to brawlers like Rakugaki Showtime, with a more well-known Power Stone. It never saw release due to Bottom Up going under and filing for bankruptcy. In 2005, an unfinished build of the game was sold via cartridge through Yahoo Japan's auction site for $3,500. On December 3, 2008, the prototype was released to the public via Team Carrot. The build's copyright date is listed as the year 2000, and within its files are a number of placeholder graphics. Some of these graphics hail from Final Fantasy VIII, and within the ROM is a drawing of Mario's head. It's really not clear as to why these are here, but they could have been used to test the game in its early stages. Bottom Up had another fighter in the works before they closed their doors, being Chanbara Fighter, Master of Puppets. This title was announced in '99 and scheduled for a Japan-only release on December 17th that same year. The game's roster had a marionette appearance, with strings attached to their limbs. The term Chanbara roughly translates to sword fighting, with each character having their own sword-like weapon. A chef fighter named Coronet would wield a frying pan, and an old man called Bagasm fought with a pipe. There was even a story in place, with rumors of the land of Pastelpoo's princess being kidnapped, sending 6 brave souls into action to save her. The game was set up as a one-on-one fighter, with players controlling characters with the D-pad and attacks being assigned to the C buttons or the analog stick. For one reason or another, Chanbara was cancelled. Forever Dragonz was being developed by Software Creations, with designer and producer Hayden Dalton at the lead. In more recent times, Dalton is known for his work as lead designer on the first 2 Darksiders games. The game's stages were planned to have several layers, as opposed to the singular layer seen in fighters like Street Fighter, and the stages also had destructible elements. They also wanted the roster to be customizable, with players able to upgrade their abilities and swap characters with other players. A number of moves had been motion captured by the team, and a lot of time was put into making the game work fully. According to Dalton's LinkedIn page, however, the title was cancelled by around '97. An entry for Hiryu no Ken, or Fist of the Flying Dragon series, was once being made for the disk drive. There were apparently 2 versions lined up for the DD, being a real and SD version. SD refers to super deformed or chibi style for the game, which was first seen in an entry for the Super Nintendo in '94 called SD Hiryu no Ken. It's possible this was related to the previous title released on the base N64, but this game was never released. Another cancelled fighter was Raise, by developer Interplay. Previously going under the name Realms of Valor, it was a fighter with the Dungeons & Dragons license, taking place in the Forgotten Realms universe. IGN's N64.com detailed how Interplay played with ambitious ideas for the game's multiplayer, citing 2-on-2 fights and team battles as some of the possible modes. Beyond fighters, hack-and-slash games were also a rare commodity on the system, with a confirmed case of at least one getting the axe. In development around 1997, Dragon Sword originally went under the name Dragon Storm and was in the works at Interactive Studios by the dedicated Team Storm. The game had 20 different levels spread across 5 worlds, and over 40 weapons to choose from. It also featured co-op missions and a 4-player deathmatch mode. The plan was to have it come out first on N64, with a PC release planned 6 months later. It was practically complete, if a review from 64 Magazine is any indication. In it, the outlet gave the game a rating of 93%, lamenting the fact it wouldn't see the light of day. They even asked readers to write about their desire to see it released on an attached form. If enough were sent back, the magazine would send them off to publisher MGM in hopes they'd consider. Though these attempts were unsuccessful, a playable beta surfaced online in April 2010 thanks to an anonymous collector. In January of 2019, Pico Interactive shared the news they had obtained the rights and source code to the game with the hope of bringing it back from the grave. They previously restored the N64 port of 40 Winks after a successful Kickstarter campaign, but Dragon Sword currently remains missing in action. In terms of shoot-'em-up games, there were a few for the 64 that ended up being shot down. One of them was Viewpoint 2064, which was described as a mix of the earlier Viewpoint games and Star Fox 64. Developer Samiko was in talks with a few studios for a worldwide release. It had its first and only showing at Space World 99, with the game being cancelled not long after. It was then Viewpoint came back from the brink, with Samiko planning to showcase it at the Tokyo Game Show in September 2000, aiming for release in Japan by November 24th. This would be the final update for the game before it disappeared. In 2015, a playable prototype surfaced on eBay for an asking price of $3,000. Soon after, YouTuber Rama Shatan got in contact with the buyer, who sent them a recording. Dezaemon DD was an expansion to a pre-existing shoot-'em-up that exclusively released in Japan in '98. The base game's editor mode reveals there was some kind of connection between the two games planned, but not much else is known about the expansion. The pinball genre also has a few absent titles on the N64, such as Digital Eclipse's Addams Family Pinball. It was based on the real-life pinball machine, which stands as the best-selling pinball machine of all time. One of the machine's coders, Jeff Vavasauer, said the game came into existence because a home version was seen as the next logical step. The team had a model comprised of 90,000 polygons which would be scaled down appropriately for whatever console it would be ported to. It also had accurate physics, featuring a mocap system used for real pinball tables. Things were going smoothly, but in late '99, the publisher GT Interactive had second thoughts about the viability of a pinball game, and soon dropped the project. There were also plans for release on the PC and rumors of a PS1 version, but these fell through as well. No screenshots of the game exist, as it never existed in an assembled state. Another pinball title was Palladium, being developed by a small European studio called Progressive Media. They showed it off to Titus at the European Computer Trade Show in '99, but the publisher passed on it. The team tried their hand at the title once more, planning to release it on the Game Boy Advance, but again failed to find a publisher. There were a few N64 puzzle games that never saw the light of day either. Like Thunder Go was a puzzle game by Togoyo Inc., based on the Chinese board game Go. It first appeared in issue 41 of Edge magazine on a list of upcoming N64 games for Japan, with a planned release date of January '97. A single screenshot of the title was shown in issue 90 of EGM, which came out the same year Go was planned for. Ironically, Go never got far along. The puzzle platformer Freak Boy was being developed by Zono Inc. and published by Virgin. This title was first showcased at E3 '96, originally under the name Stacker. Former VP of Design at Virgin, Julian Rignall, played an early demo and thought highly of it, even saying it was one of the greatest games ever made. Playing as the titular character, players could absorb 3 artifacts at a time to make up Freak Boy's head, chest, and feet, having a variety of abilities to play around with. An excerpt from GamePro had Freak Boy listed for a first quarter '97 release, but this was later pushed to late '98. The game went through a number of changes at the request of Virgin, being reworked from the ground up twice during development. By 1998, the game was put on indefinite hold and was never picked up again. Rignall told IGN, "It was a combination of idiots, morons, and stupid management decisions. Development dragged on for years and it just never got anywhere. By the time it kind of reached a point where the game was playable, the code was so unstable and badly put together they couldn't actually build a game out of it." Years later, in September 2015, a reader of Unseen 64 had stumbled across a working prototype of Freak Boy at a car boot sale. Carnivale. The anonymous reader bought the cart and later uploaded snippets of early alpha footage for the world to see. Another canned puzzle title came from an unexpected franchise. Dragon Ball Z Block Butoden was in the works for N64, apparently being made by Seta Corporation. Given that Seta almost exclusively make puzzle games, coupled with the word block in the title, it's likely this would have been a puzzle game with a Dragon Ball flair. Aside from the name appearing on an advertisement for the 64 DD, no info about this game is known. A few strategy games never got their time to shine on the system, such as another title by Seta that was shown at Space World 1999. Gendai Dai-Senryaku Ultimate War was another entry in the War Sim series Dai-Senryaku, and would have supported the 64 DD's RANnet online service, where up to 4 players could connect. It went through a few changes, but the game was scheduled for a spring 2000 release. By August that same year, Seta announced the game would revert back to the base model N64, with a playable showing at that year's Space World event. This version didn't get released either. Another RTS was Clever Trick's Echo Delta, revealed at Space World 2000. As an RTS game with RPG and action elements taking place underwater, the main goal was raising your ship to the surface by finding resources on the sea bottom. Players had an 18-minute time limit to accomplish this, with finding resources helping your submarine survive longer alongside weapon upgrades. IGN had the chance to play a preview of the game, and were told it was 90% complete, and scheduled for a December 2000 release in Japan. They were unsure about an international release, but believed it wouldn't be out of the question as most of the game's text was written in English. Still, nothing ever arose in any region. There's also plenty of N64 games from somewhat niche genres that were scrapped. Wet Corpse was a survival horror title in the works at Vic Tokai, and allegedly took a page out of Resident Evil's book. Few story details are known, but upon starting the game, the player would already be dead. The game was also being developed for the Sega Saturn, but both versions ended up getting cancelled, with nothing to show for it. Hashire Noku no Uma, or Run, My Horse, was an animal simulation game being made by Culture Brain. Aside from it potentially being some sort of pet game or horse racing sim, no further information exists. Carnivale was in development at Terraglyph Interactive, and was based on the 1999 film of the same name. Described by IGN as an odd circus-style platform game, it was first announced at E3 99. Vatical Entertainment told IGN in September 2000 it would see a release on December 5th that year, but the date came and went with no sign of Carnivale. On February 8, 2001, Vatical announced the game would likely never come out on the console. Terraglyph had recently laid off several team members, leaving the game in an unfinished state. Vatical claimed the game was around 50 to 60% finished, and at the time were unsure whether to pass the project over to another developer or simply can the game. Ultimately, they chose the latter option. The game Derby Day was a visual novel developed by both Aquamarine and Chunsoft, led by Chunsoft's founder Koichi Nakamura. Derby Day was believed to come out before the end of 1999, but not much else is known about the title, or why it was cancelled. Developed by Lobotomy Studios, Caesar's Palace 64 was a gambling title based on the real-world casino of the same name. The game featured a fully 3D rendition of the building with multiple floors and a variety of rooms. To work around the lack of voiceover, the game's designers came up with an animation system that gave the models a large amount of facial expressions, which had sites like IGN rather impressed. It was planned for a summer 99 release, specifically August 2nd, and carried an M rating. It was cancelled for unknown reasons. Redemption was a 3D adventure game that combined puzzle and platform elements from multiple viewpoints in an open-world fashion. Being developed by Cranberry Source, the game first made the rounds in '96 in several magazines. Redemption was one of 3 projects the studio were working on at the time, and studio co-founder John Rittman touted it as their magnum opus. In April '98, Rittman and other Cranberry staff were hired by Argonaut Games, which likely contributed to Redemption being shelved. There's also 2 Nintendo 64 games where their genre, among other things, is completely unknown. Developed by Lobotomy Software, Aquaria was the studio's first project for the N64. When the company was acquired by Crave, the studio was renamed to Lobotomy Studios, and they were put to work on the aforementioned Caesar's Palace 64. Nothing further came from Aquaria. And from GameTech, there was a game called Crazy Cajun Carl. One of the game's artists shared work she had done on the game through her website, showcasing several characters and 3D models. Did you also know that 50 Cent was rumored to voice Epona in Twilight Princess? Or that an official Nintendo website lied about Dragonite evolving into Yoshi? For more facts, check out our videos on Zelda rumors and Pokemon rumors.